Maybe they cause motion sickness, maybe they're just too scary, or maybe they're just too annoying. We asked our followers on social media what rides they would never ride again in Disney World, and we've got the answers for you today on DFB Guide. Hey everybody, it's AJ for Disney Food Blog. We wanted to do something a little fun for you today and hopefully helpful. We asked our Twitter followers what Disney World rides they would never ride again. Which ones are one and done for them? We got a lot of responses. And so we basically just pulled out the most popular responses and want to share those with you so that maybe we can warn you a little bit about the downsides of a few of these rides so that you can prepare yourself and your family for rides that may potentially cause motion sickness, might be scary to some folks, or, just might be boring and annoying to others. So we wanted to share those with you today, and please let us know in the comments your thoughts. We definitely want to hear from you if these are rides you love, and if people definitely shouldn't consider them one and done, they should try them out again, or if you have had similar experiences and you are done with these rides as well, please let us know in the comments. Here we go. A huge thanks to all of our Twitter followers for contributing to this, and if you don't follow us on Twitter, head on over there, twitter.com/DisneyFoodBlog, and give us a follow. Lots of rides topped our list because of motion sickness. There's lots of simulator rides and otherwise super jerky rides in Disney World, and these were definitely ones we heard a lot in the feedback from our Twitter followers. And if you're not sure how little kids are going to do, try out a shorter, less intense ride that includes spinning like the teacups or even Dumbo to see how they do before they go on some of these more intense rides. So the one we heard the most was Mission Space, and this is particularly the orange team, not necessarily the green team, because we know the green team doesn't necessarily spin the same way that the orange team does. So this is a simulator attraction. It's in Epcot's Future World, and it lets you experience what it's like to be an astronaut as you prepare for the first manned mission to Mars. So you'll get assigned a job, either the navigator, the pilot, the commander, or the engineer, and you enter the shuttle cockpit, which is a relatively small and enclosed space. And on top of that, you also have an over-shoulder restraint like you do on a roller coaster. So this one is particularly rough on people who are claustrophobic, don't like enclosed spaces, don't like to not be able to get out of a situation quickly that they're in. So in addition to motion sickness, this can also cause problems for claustrophobia as well. So on your mission, you complete 2 jobs, which are different for each position. It's not a make or break kind of situation, so no worries if you end up without an engineer, and the buttons will light up when you need to press them. So it's not rocket science, so to speak. But on the journey, you'll experience G-forces of 2.5 G during the ride. So that can be pretty intense for some people who aren't expecting something like that. Now, one of our Twitter followers, Batgirl76, said that this completely messed up her equilibrium and she almost got sick. Basically says she's never ever going on this again. So there are some pretty serious folks who are totally done with Mission Space. Now, the centrifugal force of the ride creates the feeling of acceleration by spinning and tilting, which can really mess with your system if you're sensitive to inner ear disruptions. And since it's a lot more intense than your average car ride, you can have a reaction even if you've never experienced motion sickness before. So unfortunately, closing your eyes on this one doesn't help too much with combating motion sickness. So no matter how much you don't want to look at that tiny screen, keep your eyes focused there, keep your head back against the headrest, because moving it around can make the feeling worse. And here's a tip from a real astronaut who actually rode Mission Space when it first opened. Eat a banana beforehand. It helps them get through flight training, so it might help you get through simulated flight training. It sort of settles your stomach and puts a little something in there, but not too much. Now remember, Mission Space has 2 options, green and orange, and the green side doesn't spin like the orange side does. It mostly just tilts back a bit and travels around the Earth rather than all the way to Mars. All right, the next one we heard a lot about from our Twitter followers was Primeval Whirl over in Animal Kingdom. So this is a mousetrap coaster, and this was brought to Disney as is, so it's not any crazy Disney Imagineering tech, although they did overlay a pretty adorable carnival-themed retelling of the extinction of the dinosaurs on this one. It's one of my favorite rides, honestly. So you board a round ride vehicle with a lap bar restraint, and that kind of keeps you in place as you zip along the track. Your car is pulled up to the top of the coaster and slowly works its way back down. down with some super tight and quick turns, plus some quick spins. So it's kind of like a tilt-a-whirl kind of situation that will toss you around the ride vehicle. And there's not too many big drops here, but the ride is really pretty rough when it comes to those spins and those quick turns. Now, our Twitter follower, Tomorrow Society, it's actually Tomorrow Sock, but I think it means society. He says, Primeval Whirl, I don't love spinning coasters, and that one just isn't a comfortable experience. And I think that's how a lot of people feel about it. So the spins and jerky motion have been known to cause motion sickness, and there's a reason why this one is nicknamed Primeval Whirl. Next one that was mentioned as far as motion sickness and scary factor is Dinosaur, and this is also in Dinoland in Animal Kingdom. Now this one is a little less likely to cause motion sickness, but it still is a really jerky and somewhat uncomfortable ride. So here's what happens. You board a time rover, quote unquote, which looks a lot like a Jeep, and if you've ridden Indiana Jones over in Disneyland, it's basically the same ride system. So there's 4 seats per row and individual seat belts, plus some hand grips to hold on to. So our Twitter follower Steven264422617 says Dinosaur beats me up too much, most uncomfortable ride I've ever been on. I totally get it. I agree, Steven. Although I will say the Matterhorn in Disneyland, I got a lot more bruises from that one than I did from Dinosaur or Indiana Jones, but it is also very, very dark. So it gets pretty hard to get your bearings, and it's definitely not for those who hate jump scares. Now, if you have kiddos who really love dinos but aren't up for this ride, there's plenty of other things to do in Dinoland. You know, it's got one of the best playground areas in the Boneyard, and Triceratops Spin is the same exact ride as Dumbo, just without the long waits. So the next one folks mentioned as a motion sickness kind of ride is Star Tours. Not only is this a simulator ride that involves a big screen to project a scene, it rocks side to side, tilts back and forth, and there's some pretty jerky stops and otherwise rough movements. It's also in 3D. So it's really messing with your sight, perception, and equilibrium all at the same time. So the seating is like a theater and you're all facing the screen, and the 3D seems to be a trigger for a lot of people. So if you find that to be the case, focus on C3PO, who is actually in the room with you. This ride doesn't move nearly as much as Mission Space does, so closing your eyes is an option to lessen the intensity as well. And remember, this one can have some lasting effects as well. Our Twitter follower John's Heat said, no other ride at Disney World makes me want to hurl other than Star Tours. I still ride it, but I am always in shambles for the next 5 to 10 minutes, so you may still feel off your game for a few minutes there after you ride. Now, sitting in the front row seems to help a bit as the movement doesn't seem as intense there, and if you're a huge Star Wars fan, this ride might be one that's worth taking an over-the-counter motion sickness medication for. But if you're still not up for it, there's tons of Star Wars stuff to do in Hollywood Studios even before Galaxy's Edge opens later this year. So head straight to Star Wars Launch Bay for character meet and greets and an awesome behind-the-scenes documentary that's great for any film lover, whether they're Star Wars fans or not. And don't forget to sign the kiddos up for the Jedi Training Academy in Hollywood Studios as well. Now here's one we wanted to mention in this motion sickness group, Flight of Passage. Surprisingly, not too many people mention this one, but it seems that even if you get motion sickness on other rides, Flight of Passage might not be as bad. This one incorporates a much larger screen, kind of like an IMAX screen for Soarin', but also involves 3D and movement, although you're on your own Banshee, which is kind of like a bike rather than a seat with a seatbelt. If you're sensitive to 3D, closing your eyes can help. The ride doesn't spin, but it does involve a few small swooping drops, and air is blown into your face to help create the feel of being on the back of a Banshee. But this can also help with motion sickness. So the ride is really incredible and features some amazing Disney ride technology. So if you're fine on Soarin', some Ginger Chews or an over-the-counter motion sickness medication might help you through this one as well. Now, the next category of ride are those scary rides. Plenty of rides were deemed too scary to try again by our Twitter followers. And if you're not a thrill ride person, you're just not a thrill ride person. There's no tips or tricks around that. If you're not sure if your kiddos can handle some of the more intense rides, try them out on some of the tamer ones and build up to the big guys. For coasters, for example, we recommend starting with Goofy's Barnstormer, moving up to Slinky Dog Dash, and Mine Train before you hit Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. And if your kid loves those and they're not afraid afraid of the drops, move on to Space Mountain to test how they do in the dark before trying out these three. Number 1, Expedition Everest. So this coaster won a Guinness World Record for the most expensive coaster ever built. The ride is themed around the terrifying Yeti. We also call the Disco Yeti because it doesn't actually do what he's supposed to do. And so they put a blinking strobe light on him to make him look like he's sort of moving, even though he can't move. But anyway, he's guarding the Forbidden Mountain next to Everest. So this coaster is one of the most intense at Disney World. There are large portions of it in the dark, and it also goes backwards, reaches 50 miles per hour, 3 Gs, and has an 80-foot drop. So our Twitter follower, Soprano Aurora, says, Expedition Everest, rode it twice, got sick each time. My equilibrium was off so much too. Now this is definitely one of the scarier coasters at Disney World, and we can't recommend grabbing a front seat for a less intense ride like we usually do because this ride does go backwards, and sitting at the front makes that part a little more intense. And frankly, from my perspective, that backwards part is the worst part because that's the one that really messes with your equilibrium as well, and you kind of feel motion sick at the same time as you're kind of freaked out. The next one that's been deemed a little bit too scary by some of our Twitter followers is Tower of Terror. Now this one is themed for the classic TV show The Twilight Zone, and the Hollywood Studios ride has one of the most interesting backstories of all Disney World rides. Don't forget to check out our backstories video, by the way. We did a fun video all about Disney ride backstories. It's really cool. So this one's set in the Hollywood Tower Hotel and follows the story of one tragic night, October 31st, 1939, when lightning struck the tower and 5 people riding the elevator mysteriously disappeared. Now you're going to board the elevator on a night very much like that one in 1939. So this ride is dark and it's all drops. The drops reach a speed of 39 miles per hour, drop up to 130 feet, and while there's relatively minor 1.3 G G-forces, there's 3 drops and there's 3 different patterns, so you never know what you're going to get. Super unpredictable. If you prefer your ghosts without falling elevators, head to Haunted Mansion instead. There's also a chicken exit at this ride if you still want to check out the queue because it's filled with lots of props from the Twilight Zone. And don't forget there's always rider swap if you're traveling with a group that has some who do want to ride and some who don't. And the next Hollywood Studios ride that people said this is just too scary and they were one and done is Rock and Roller Coaster. This is basically the most intense coaster at Disney World since it has inversions. Now the storyline is simple enough. You're invited to a free Aerosmith concert, the band has sent a limo to pick you up, the limo is the ride vehicle, and you head down the LA freeways with Aerosmith songs playing in the background. So this starts out with a 0 to 57 mile per hour launch in just 2.8 seconds. There's 3 inversions, which means loops of course, and you'll reach 5 Gs on this one, the most G-forces of any Disney World ride. Now our Twitter follower Sarah Unswa, UNSW, says, Rock and Roller Coaster, the headaches are just too much. So be aware that that's definitely a possibility. So maybe try Space Mountain if you like the idea of an indoor in-the-dark coaster but hate the upside-down part. But remember that Rock and Roller Coaster is one of the fastest rides at Disney World, coming in at about 75 seconds long. So if you decide to give it a try, it's basically over before you know it. Now, we've covered those motion sickness rides, we've covered those scary rides, but we do have a few answers from our Twitter followers on rides that were just too boring or too annoying for them to ride again. Now, these are some classic Disney attractions, so get prepared, you guys. We're gonna try to do justice to our Twitter followers for saying that these are one and dones for them. Of course, it was mentioned that people are not going to ride It's a Small World again. Now, this ride first debuted at the 1964 World's Fair along with Carousel of Progress and was a salute to UNICEF. It was originally called Children of the World. Disney tested out several ride systems at the World's Fair before moving them to Disneyland. This is the same ride system used on Pirates of the Caribbean and other boat rides at Disney parks. Now, Mary Blair, one of Walt Disney's favorite artists, designed the stylistic elements of the ride. She also worked on Peter Pan, Cinderella, and Alice in Wonderland. And this ride is classic Disney at its best. Whimsical, sweet. Really, the only problem people might have with the ride is the song, that quintessential earworm song of Disney parks. Honestly, you can get the song stuck in your head by just walking past the ride. So if you want to see some classic Disney animatronics but can't stand the ride, head to Pirates of the Caribbean instead for a different catchy tune. Our Twitter follower Strandy26 says Small World should be dismantled and shot into space, never to be seen again. So, FYI, the song is written by the Sherman Brothers, who created many of the songs we Disney fans know and love, from Mary Poppins to The Jungle Book, and plenty of songs you'll hear around the parks. Walt wanted there to be one song to bring the whole of It's a Small World together that could be easily translated to many languages and fit the bill of the happiest cruise that ever sailed. So it may get stuck in your head, but the song was designed to be simple, catchy, and share a positive message. The next one folks did not love, and they're one and done with this one, is Tomorrowland Speedway. This Magic Kingdom ride is a classic. It was their opening day in 1971, and it's simple and not trying to outdo anything. You're just driving a small car along a 2,000-foot track at a top speed of 7 miles per hour. Arguably the biggest draw is that kiddos can drive. They have to be just 32 inches tall or 54 inches tall to ride without a parent in the car too. Now the downside, and why people don't want to ride it again, is definitely the exhaust smell, that noise, and the lengthy wait time. The capacity for this attraction isn't too high, and wait times can hit 40 plus minutes most days. The cars have internal combustion engines, so they're loud and have a distinct smell. Rebecca Pym, our Twitter follower, says Tomorrowland Speedway, I get a headache just by walking by it. And I gotta agree, I've waited in that line a lot with my kiddo, and it is pretty overwhelming, that exhaust smell. So if you want to cruise around Tomorrowland without the added exhaust fumes or a lengthy wait, go for a ride on the People Mover. It doesn't let your little one drive a car, but it lets you sit back and relax while taking in the sights. And finally, another one that people said they won't ride again because it's annoying is Journey into Imagination with Figment. Now, I know my heart's breaking too on this one, you guys. The original attraction, which ran until 1998, Journey into Imagination, was a whimsical journey with the eccentric inventor, the Dream Finder, and his sidekick Figment. Now, the two would lead guests through art, literature, performing arts, and science, and featuring classic Disney animatronics as well as effects and set pieces that were quite advanced for its original opening in 1983. The ride reopened in '99 as Journey into Your Imagination and starred Eric Idle leading guests on a tour of the Imagination Institute with only a brief cameo by Figment, and the signature song One Little Spark was missing as well. Now they did change the ride one more time. Figment came back in the third and current version of the ride, but it's still not quite the original that everyone loved. So, changing this ride definitely goes on the list of changes Disney has made over the years that people have hated, and our followers miss the original, and lots of them won't bother riding this new version at all. So we'll agree this one isn't as good as it originally was before the retheming, and we definitely miss Dream Finder and that rainbow hallway. So there's a bunch of rides that our Twitter followers said they were one and done. They're just riding once and they don't want to ride again. Let us know in the comments what you guys think. We'd love to hear from you. Go ahead and argue with our Twitter followers. Let us know if you love these rides and if they're some of your favorites. And let us know other rides that maybe you were done with after just one ride. Thanks for listening and thanks for watching, you guys. I hope this was helpful to those of you who haven't been to Disney or haven't ridden some of these rides to prepare you for maybe the motion sickness or the scare factor, etc. This is AJ for Disney Food Vlog, and we'll see you real soon.